was having his usual morning coffee when the alarms started blaring throughout Earth's military command center. The red lights flashing across every screen meant only one thing: someone was calling for help. But this wasn't just anyone. This was the Galactic Council, the same group of alien species who had basically slammed the door in humanity's face. Just 3 years ago, Heian almost choked on his coffee when he saw who the message was from. These were the same aliens who had looked at Earth and called it a death world. They said humans were too violent, too unpredictable, too dangerous to join their peaceful galactic community. They had literally used the words, savage primitives. In their rejection letter, Lieutenant Park Minji rushed over to his desk, her tablet showing incoming data that made her face go pale. "Commander, you need to see this right now," she said, her voice shaking slightly. "The Council isn't just asking for help. They're begging." Heian pulled up the main display, and what he saw made his blood run cold. Entire star systems were going dark, one after another. These weren't military targets either. These were farming worlds. Peaceful colonies where families grew food for half the galaxy. The few emergency broadcasts still coming through showed scenes that would give anyone nightmares. "How bad is it?" Heian asked. Though he wasn't sure he wanted to know the answer, Minji's fingers flew across her holographic controls, pulling up casualty reports and tactical data. 17 worlds have gone completely silent in the past 48 hours. The ones still transmitting are showing massive ecological damage. Whatever's attacking them isn't just destroying cities, it's consuming entire continents. The irony wasn't lost on UN. For decades, the Council had kept Earth at arm's length because humans came from a world that tried to kill them every day. Earthquakes, hurricanes, volcanic eruptions, predators that could hunt in packs, diseases that could wipe out civilizations. Earth had thrown everything at humanity, and somehow they had not just survived, but thrived. "Sir, there's more," Minji continued, her voice getting quieter. "Their regular military forces tried to engage the attackers last week. They lost 70% of their fleet in the first encounter. The survivors are calling it a complete massacre." Hyun leaned back in his chair, processing what he was hearing. The same council that had rejected humanity for being too aggressive was now asking those same dangerous primitives to save them from something their own military couldn't handle. "What exactly are they asking for?" he asked. "Full military intervention. They want our fleets, our marines, our weapons, everything we've got. They're offering full council membership and complete access to their technology networks in exchange." Heian stared at the data streams showing entire worlds being consumed by unknown forces. Millions of innocent civilians were dying while politicians debated. These weren't the same council members who had rejected Earth. These were refugees, farmers, children who had never done anything wrong. "Get me Admiral Kim on the secure channel," Heian ordered, "and start running preliminary deployment scenarios. Looks like the galaxy is about to learn why Earth breeds the kind of soldiers it does." Admiral Kim Taeho stared out the massive window of his command ship, watching dozens of human warships floating in the darkness of space. Each vessel told a story of humanity's brutal journey to the stars. These weren't the sleek, elegant ships that other species built. These were war machines, scarred and deadly, designed by a species that had learned to fight for every breath on a planet that never stopped trying to kill them. Captain Choi Sunmi stood behind him, her jaw clenched tight with anger that had been building for 3 long years. "Do you remember what they called us during the rejection hearing?" she asked, her voice barely containing her frustration. "They said humans were genetically predisposed to violence because we evolved on a death world." Kim remembered that day perfectly. The council chambers had been filled with representatives from peaceful species, herbivores who had never known real hunger, creatures from gentle worlds where the biggest predator might be the size of a house cat. They had looked at humanity's history of wars, survival against impossible odds, and the simple fact that Earth regularly tried to exterminate its own inhabitants. and decided humans were too dangerous for civilized society. They weren't entirely wrong, Kim said, pulling up the emergency reports from the outer colonies. The numbers were staggering. Entire populations wiped out in hours. Ecosystems stripped bare. Families torn apart by something that the Council's military couldn't even slow down. We are violent. Earth made sure of that. Choi moved closer to the display, studying the tactical data. These attackers hit the vegan agricultural collective first. You know what those people are like. They haven't fought a real war in over 2,000 years. Their idea of conflict resolution is a strongly worded diplomatic note. The Admiral scrolled through more reports, each one worse than the last. The peaceful species that made up most of the Council had built their entire civilization on the assumption that everyone in the galaxy was as reasonable as they were. They had no concept of an enemy that couldn't be negotiated with, no understanding of threats that had to be met with overwhelming force. Sir, we're receiving updated casualty figures, reported Communications Officer Nam Woo-jin from across the bridge. The Theron homeworld is under direct attack. They're estimating 12 million civilians in immediate danger. Kim felt something cold settle in his stomach. The Therons were basically space rabbits, small, gentle creatures who had never hurt anyone in their entire recorded history. They raised their young in communal nurseries and solved disputes by singing harmony songs together. The idea of them facing whatever was destroying these worlds made his hands clench into fists. Captain Choi, how long since the Council formally rejected our membership application? He asked. 3 years, 4 months, and 16 days, sir. Kim nodded slowly, then activated the ship-wide communication system. His voice echoed through every corridor of every human vessel in the fleet. All personnel, this is Admiral Kim. 3 years ago, the Galactic Council told us we were too dangerous to join their peaceful community. Today, they're asking those same dangerous humans to save innocent lives that their own forces can't protect. We're going to show them exactly why Earth breeds the kind of soldiers it does. Prepare for immediate departure. The moment Admiral Kim gave the order, something incredible happened that shocked even the humans themselves. Within just 6 hours, 43 massive warships had launched from Earth's orbital stations and were already jumping to faster than light speed. Even the human logistics officers were staring at their screens in disbelief. Captain Han Jamin stood on the bridge of his destroyer, watching the tactical display show their fleet moving in perfect formation through hyperspace. This kind of rapid deployment was something that had never been attempted before, not even during humanity's worst conflicts. But somehow, every ship was exactly where it needed to be. Every crew member at their station, every weapon system fully loaded and ready. Sir, I'm getting reports from all departments, called Lieutenant Yoon Sora from her engineering station, her voice filled with amazement. Every single system across the entire fleet is running at peak efficiency. Even the ships that were scheduled for maintenance are reporting full combat readiness. Han couldn't help but smile. This was what happened when you told a human that innocent people were dying and needed help immediately. Every petty bureaucratic delay, every routine safety check, every bit of red tape that normally slowed things down simply vanished. Engineers who had been planning to take leave canceled their vacation. Pilots who were off duty showed up in their flight suits. Supply officers who normally took days to process requisitions had loaded every ship with enough ammunition to level. A small Moon. Communications officer Nam Woo-jin looked up from his console with an expression that was half confusion, half amusement. Captain, we're getting constant messages from the Council ambassadors. They want hourly updates on our position, estimated arrival time, fleet composition, tactical capabilities, and something called a diplomatic engagement protocol. Han shook his head in disbelief. What's our current travel time to the outer colonies? Commander Lee Han. 4 days, sir. Maybe 3 if we push the engines. The captain thought about the council's standard operating procedures that he'd studied during the failed membership negotiations. When the council military needed to respond to a crisis, they first formed a committee to study the situation. Then they held hearings to determine if intervention was justified. Then they debated the proper level of response. Then they voted on it. The entire process typically took 6 to 8 weeks, assuming everyone agreed on the first vote. Nam, send them a reply, Han ordered. Tell the council ambassadors that we'll arrive in 4 days, and that their people will be safe by day 5. Also remind them that this is exactly what they were afraid of when they rejected our membership application. Lieutenant Yoon looked confused. Sir, what do you mean? Han gestured at the tactical display showing their fleet moving at maximum speed toward a battle they knew almost nothing about. Earth doesn't just breed fighters, Lieutenant. It breeds fighters who move fast. When something on our world wanted to kill us, we didn't have time for committee meetings or diplomatic protocols. We learned to identify the threat, grab our weapons, and deal with it immediately. The council was terrified of that mentality, and now they need it, Yoon said, understanding dawning on her face. Exactly. For 3 years, they've been dealing with threats using their careful, measured, civilized approach. How's that working out for them? Han pulled up the casualty reports that were still streaming in from the outer colonies. 17 worlds consumed while they debated the proper response. Nam finished sending the message to the council and turned back to his captain. Sir, they're asking about our rules of engagement and requesting detailed battle plans. Han's smile turned cold. Tell them our rules of engagement are simple. We're going to save every civilian we can, and we're going to destroy anything that tries to stop us. As for battle plans, they'll see those when we arrive. When the human fleet emerged from hyperspace, what they saw made even battle-hardened veterans pause in shock. Haven Prime had been one of the most beautiful worlds in the outer colonies, a planet covered in vast green forests and crystal blue oceans, where peaceful farming communities had thrived for centuries. Now, massive gray scars spread across the continents like infected wounds. Growing larger by the hour, Captain Oh Dong-hyuk stared at his main screen, trying to process what he was seeing. How long ago did this attack begin? He asked the council liaison, who had been assigned to his ship Ambassador Veltar. A tall, thin alien with pale blue skin was trembling as she looked at the devastation. 18 hours, she whispered. 18 hours ago, this was home to 12 million people. Before Oh could respond, his sensor officer Bae Young-ji suddenly shouted from her station. Captain, I'm detecting massive movement on the planet's surface. Something huge is rising from those gray areas. The entire bridge crew watched in stunned silence as enormous shapes began lifting off from the dying world. These weren't ships in any sense that humans understood. They were living creatures, each one the size of a city district, with wings that looked like they were made from crystalline bone and metal. Their bodies pulsed with an organic rhythm, and where they had been resting on the planet's surface, absolutely nothing remained. Not trees, not buildings, not even soil, just bare rock. Dear gods, whispered Navigator Lee Chanwook, those things are enormous. How many are there? Sensors are detecting 47 individual creatures, Bae reported, her voice tight with stress. And Captain, they're not just big, they're accelerating toward us at incredible speed. Ambassador Veltar moved closer to O's command chair, her entire body shaking. Those are the Devourers, she said, her voice barely audible. They appeared in our space 3 months ago. We don't know where they came from, but they consume everything organic they touch. Our military tried to stop them at the Kepler system. We lost 300 ships without even scratching one of them. O studied the creatures on his tactical display, watching how they moved through space with an efficiency that spoke of millions of years of evolution. But instead of fear, he felt something else entirely, a cold. calculating hunger that his ancestors had developed while hunting mammoths on the frozen plains of ancient Earth. "Interesting," he said, his voice remarkably calm. "They're apex predators. In their natural environment, probably never encountered anything that could fight back effectively." "Fight back?" Veltar stared at him in disbelief. "Captain, nothing can fight those things. They've consumed 17 worlds in 3 months. Your species may be warriors, but these creatures are forces of nature." O turned to look at the ambassador, and she took a step back from the expression in his eyes. It was the same look that had once made saber-toothed tigers decide to find easier. "Pray, Ambassador, my species evolved on a world where forces of nature tried to kill us every single day. We learned to hunt them back." He opened the ship-wide communication channel, his voice carrying to every human vessel in the fleet. "All ships, this is Captain O. What we're looking at are predators, very large, very successful predators that have never met anything like us before. They consume organic matter and use size and fear as their primary weapons. But here's what they don't understand about humans. We've been the prey before, and we learned to turn the tables." The devourer creatures were now close enough that their individual features were visible on the main screen. O smiled grimly as he continued his broadcast. "Today, these things are going to learn why Earth's ecosystem produced persistence hunters who never give up. Pack tactics that confuse larger prey, and the kind of stubborn refusal to die that made us the apex predators of our own death world." What happened next shocked every council observer watching from their safe distance. While alien military doctrine called for long-range engagement and careful tactical positioning, the human fleet did something that seemed completely insane. They charged straight into the swarm of massive devourer creatures like ancient warriors rushing into battle. Captain Kong Minho was leading the most dangerous mission of all. Instead of trying to destroy the creatures from the outside, he had convinced Admiral Kim to let him try something that no other species had ever attempted: boarding one of these living nightmare ships. His assault team was crammed into a modified troop transport, racing toward the largest devourer at speeds that would have liquefied most alien pilots. 30 seconds to contact, called his pilot, Lieutenant Park Dong-soo, his hands steady on controls, despite the G-forces that were crushing them into their seats. "Sir, are you absolutely sure about this plan?" Minho checked his weapon one more time. It was a standard human assault rifle, but loaded with ammunition that had been specially designed for Earth's harsh environment. "Park, these things have been eating civilized species for months. Time to introduce them to an uncivilized one." The moment their ship punched through the creature's outer membrane, everything went wrong in the best possible way. Alarms started blaring throughout the Devourer's bioship as its immune systems detected something it had never encountered before: aggressive organisms that were actively fighting back instead of being passively consumed. Sergeant Song Urin was the first one through the breach, her boots hitting the spongy floor of the creature's interior. "Captain, this place is trying to digest our equipment," she reported over the comm, "but it's not working. The metal is actually making it sick." Minho grinned behind his helmet's visor. Human technology wasn't just built to survive in space. It was built to survive on Earth, a world so hostile that its basic materials were poisonous to most other forms of life. Every piece of steel, every electronic component, every bit of synthetic polymer had been forged in an environment that would kill most aliens just by breathing the air. "Keep moving forward," he ordered his team. "These things evolved to consume passive prey. They have no idea how to handle something that bites back." Meanwhile, in space around them, human fighter pilots were putting on a display that left council observers speechless. Commander Lim Ji-hai watched from her bridge as her squadrons executed maneuvers that would have been impossible for pilots from gentler worlds. They were pulling turns that generated forces strong enough to crush most alien species. diving into the middle of devourer swarms with a reckless aggression that seemed suicidal. Squadron leader reporting, came the voice of Captain Yoon Minj. Over the comm. These things are fast, but they're not used to prey that fights dirty. Initiating wolf pack tactics. Lim smiled as she watched the tactical display. The human fighters weren't trying to outrun or outmaneuver the devourers. They were using Earth's most effective hunting strategy. Like ancient wolves bringing down a mammoth, they were attacking in coordinated groups, each pilot covering the others while they took turns striking at weak points. All fighters, remember what we learned from Earth's ecosystem, she broadcast to her pilots. Size doesn't matter if you can tire out your prey. These things are used to easy meals. Let's show them what happens when dinner fights back. One of her pilots, Lieutenant Choi Hyun-woo, laughed over the comm channel as he narrowly avoided a devourer's crystalline wing. Commander, I think they're getting frustrated. This big one keeps trying to catch me, but I'm too small and too fast. That's the idea, Hyun-woo. Earth taught us that persistence hunting works. Keep them chasing you while the others attack. In the refugee camps, hastily set up on the outer edge of the battle zone, something remarkable was happening that no one had expected. Thousands of alien survivors who had fled their dying worlds were getting their first real look at the species that the Galactic Council had rejected as too dangerous for civilized society. Dr. Shin Haijin had been working for 16 straight hours without a break, moving from one emergency medical station to another. She had never treated alien patients before. Her medical training had focused on human anatomy and Earth-based diseases. But as she knelt beside a small Veltarian child whose arm had been badly injured during the evacuation, she realized that suffering looked the same no matter what species you were dealing with. "Easy there, little one," she said softly, even though she wasn't sure if the child could understand her words. The universal translator was having trouble with the young Veltarian-S dialect, but her tone seemed to have a calming effect. "I know this hurts, but I'm going to fix it." The child's parents watched nervously as Shin worked. Veltarians were a peaceful, herbivorous species that had never experienced real violence before the devourers arrived. To them, humans looked like the stuff of nightmares, bipedal predators with forward-facing eyes and teeth designed for tearing meat. But as they watched this dangerous human carefully and gently treating their injured child, their fear began to change into something else entirely. "Your bone structure is completely different from ours," Shin murmured as she carefully set the child's arm. "But pain is pain, and healing is healing." She looked up at the frightened parents and gave them the kind of reassuring smile that human doctors had been perfecting for centuries. "Your little one is going to be just fine. We humans might look scary, but we're actually very good at fixing broken things." Behind her, other human medical personnel were working with the same dedication. Nurse Kim Bora was teaching Theran refugees how to treat shock in their own species. Medic Lim Jae-sung was sharing his emergency rations with a group of elderly Keplerian survivors who hadn't eaten in 2 days. None of them had ever met these alien species before, but they were treating them with the same care they would show their own families in the engineering section. Chief Ru Chung-min was solving a different kind of problem. The refugee ships had been built for peaceful trade routes and gentle worlds. They weren't designed to handle the radiation levels and gravitational stresses of an active battle zone. "Chief, the Veltarian transport is losing hull integrity," reported his assistant, Technician Park Kyung-go. "Their shielding wasn't built for this kind of energy discharge." Changmin didn't hesitate for even a second. "Strip plating from our auxiliary ships and reinforce their hulls. Use our radiation-resistant materials if you have to. Sir, that's military-grade armor plating. It's worth more than most of these civilian ships combined," Park Changmin said, looking up from his workstation with an expression that was both tired and determined. "These people lost their homes, their families, everything they ever cared about. The least we can do is make sure they don't die." from radiation poisoning while we're trying to save them. Within hours, human engineering teams were crawling all over the refugee fleet, welding additional armor plating, upgrading life support systems, and installing emergency power generators. They worked without being asked, without expecting payment, and without caring that these were the same species, whose governments had rejected humanity from their galactic community. A young Theran engineer named Quill watched in amazement as humans literally gave pieces of their own ships to protect strangers. "Why are you doing this?" he asked Changmin through a translator. Changmin looked up from where he was installing a new oxygen recycling system and smiled. "Because that's what you do when someone needs help." The moment Admiral Kim saw the tactical readouts showing Devourer creatures deliberately hunting down civilian evacuation ships, something primal awakened in every human in the fleet. It wasn't just military strategy anymore, it had become deeply personal. These aliens might have rejected humanity from their galactic community, but they were no longer strangers. They were now under human protection, and that changed everything. "All ships, new standing orders." Admiral Kim's voice carried across every communication channel with a tone that made veteran soldiers straighten up. "Any devourer targeting civilian craft is now priority target 1. I don't care if it means exposing our own ships. No refugee dies while we're here to prevent it." What happened next would be talked about in alien military academies for generations. Human ships began throwing themselves into impossible tactical situations, abandoning every principle of safe combat doctrine to shield fleeing civilians. It wasn't reckless. It was something far more dangerous than that. It was calculated sacrifice, based on a simple equation. Better a human soldier dies than an innocent civilian. Lieutenant Colonel Park Sung-ho was leading his marine assault team through the cramped corridors of a Devourer bioship when his mission parameters suddenly changed. Intelligence had just confirmed that a transport full of Theran children was trapped inside the creature's digestive chamber, slowly being dissolved alive. "Marines, change of plans," he announced over his squad's comm system. "We've got kids, and they're Theran younglings, probably scared out of their minds and waiting for someone to save them." Sergeant Kim Do-haen looked up from where he was cutting through alien biomass with a plasma torch. "Sir, the route to the digestive chamber goes straight through the creature's nervous system. It's going to fight us every step of the way. Then we fight back harder," Park replied simply. "Those children didn't ask to be born into this war. Move out, double time. Every second we waste is another second those kids are afraid." His Marines didn't question the order, didn't calculate the odds, didn't worry about the fact that they were about to assault the most dangerous part of a creature that had consumed entire worlds. They just followed their lieutenant colonel deeper into the nightmare, driven by an instinct that was older than civilization itself, the need to protect the young. Meanwhile, in space above them, Captain Yang Myung was facing her own impossible choice. Her destroyer had been positioned to provide covering fire for the evacuation fleet when sensors detected 3 massive devourers converging on a hospital ship filled with wounded aliens. "Captain, if we intercept, we'll be taking fire from 3 directions at once," warned her tactical officer, Lieutenant Kang Subin. "Our shields won't hold for more than a few minutes." Yang studied the tactical display showing the hospital ship, a slow, defenseless vessel carrying hundreds of injured refugees who couldn't even be moved to escape pods. "How many wounded are on that ship?" 812 confirmed patients, plus medical staff. Yang didn't hesitate. "All hands, battle stations. Take us directly between those devourers and the hospital ship. All power to forward and prepare for heavy contact." "Ma'am, that's suicide," her navigation officer said quietly. "No," Yang replied, watching the massive creatures closing in on the helpless medical vessel. "Suicide is giving up. This is just buying time for people who can't protect themselves." Her ship moved between the hospital vessel and the approaching devourers, Just as the first energy blasts hit their shields, the entire ship shook under the impact, lights flickering as power systems strained beyond their limits. But they held the line. In the refugee ships, alien survivors watched through their viewports in stunned silence as human vessels absorbed punishment that should have destroyed them, all to protect people they had never met. The Therans had a word in their ancient language that roughly translated to warrior guardians, someone who would die to protect strangers. They had thought it was just mythology, until today, after 3 hours of brutal combat above Haven Prime, Admiral Kim realized that conventional tactics weren't going to be enough. The Devourers were adapting to human strategies faster than expected, and more civilian ships were arriving every minute, desperately fleeing from other attacked worlds. It was time to show these creatures why Earth had produced the most dangerous predators in the known galaxy. All ships, prepare to implement Protocol Omega, Kim announced across the fleet communication system, his voice carrying a tone that made experienced officers pause in recognition. This was the voice of a man about to unleash something that had never been tried. Before an actual combat. Captain Hong Soo-young looked up from her tactical station with genuine concern written across her face. She had read about Protocol Omega in classified files, but it had always been labeled as theoretical, too dangerous and unpredictable to ever use in a real battle situation. Sir, that protocol was developed based on Earth predator behavior models, she said carefully. The AI systems have never been tested against a real enemy. We have no idea how they'll perform or if we can even control them once they're activated. Kim studied the tactical display showing devourer creatures systematically hunting down refugee ships while his fleet struggled to protect them all. These creatures moved with the coordination of a hive mind, sharing information instantly and adapting their tactics in real time. But that same hive mind mentality might also be their greatest weakness. Captain Hong, how do pack hunters on Earth defeat larger predators? He asked. She thought for a moment, remembering her studies of ancient human behavior. They use unpredictability, sir. Individual pack members make independent decisions, but work toward a common goal. The prey can't predict where the next attack will come from. Exactly. The Devourers have a hive mind. They think as one organism, which makes them incredibly efficient, but also predictable. Today, we're going to introduce them to an entire species that never learned how to think the same way twice. Kim activated the fleet-wide tactical network and began uploading the protocol Omega authorization codes. All ships, launch every combat drone you have, but these aren't going to be remotely piloted. Each drone gets an AI copy of human tactical thinking patterns, not just strategy, but actual predator instincts. We're about to release 3,000 artificial humans into this battle. The moment the protocol went live, the entire battlefield changed. Thousands of small combat drones launched from human ships, but instead of following standard attack formations, each one began moving with the unpredictable aggression of a human fighter pilot. They didn't coordinate through a central command system like normal military drones. Instead, each AI was programmed to think like an individual human warrior who had grown up fighting for survival on the most dangerous planet in the galaxy. The effect on the Devourer hive mind was immediate and devastating. These creatures had evolved to fight opponents who followed logical patterns, who could be predicted and countered by superior coordination. But the human drones didn't follow patterns. They improvised, adapted, and attacked from directions that made no tactical sense according to any civilized military doctrine. Drone pilot AI designated Hunter 247 decided to ram a Devourer's wing, joint at maximum speed, crippling the creature's mobility. AI Stalker 891 began following a damaged Devourer, harassing it with hit-and-run attacks that served no apparent strategic purpose, except to frustrate and exhaust the larger creature. Another group of 12 drones coordinated a complex flanking maneuver that looked like chaos but was actually a hunting pattern that human ancestors had used to bring down woolly mammoths. Sir, the Devourers are breaking formation, reported Tactical Officer Lee Minho, his voice filled with amazement. They can't predict where the next attack is coming from. Their hive mind keeps trying to formulate counter-strategies, but our drones keep changing tactics faster than they can adapt. Kim smiled grimly as he watched the tactical display. That's because they're not fighting drones anymore, Lieutenant. They're fighting 3,000 copies of Human Instinct, and Human Instinct doesn't follow rulebooks. 3 weeks after the Battle of Haven Prime, the Grand Chambers of the Galactic Council looked very different than they had during humanity's first membership hearing. The same elegant halls that had once echoed with speeches about human violence and unpredictability were now filled with representatives from dozens of species, all of whom owed their lives to those same dangerous humans. Ambassador Velta stood at the central podium, her voice carrying across the chamber with an authority that came from having witnessed humanity's true nature firsthand. She had been on the bridge of a human warship when they charged into certain death to save alien civilians. She had watched human doctors work around the clock to treat wounded refugees from species they'd never encountered before. She understood now what the Council had failed to grasp 3 years ago. The motion before us today is simple, she announced. To the assembled delegates, full membership in the Galactic Council for the species known as humanity. The vote is unanimous, 47 species in favor, 0 opposed. Admiral Kim stood beside her in his dress uniform, the same one he had worn to the rejection ceremony 3 years earlier. But this time, instead of disappointment, there was quiet satisfaction in his expression. Not because of the political victory, but because of what it represented for the future. We accept the Council's offer, Kim said, his voice carrying to every corner of the chamber. But we're accepting it with 2 non-negotiable conditions that I hope this Council will understand. A murmur went through the assembled delegates. It was unprecedented for a new member species to dictate terms to the Council, but after what they had witnessed, no one was inclined to argue with humanity's demands. First, Kim continued, every species that we rescued during the Devourer crisis will receive permanent human protection if they request it, not as subjects or colonies, but as what humans call pack members. We protect our pack, regardless of politics or diplomatic complications. In the audience, Dr. Shin Haijin smiled as she watched several alien delegates nod their agreement. She had spent weeks treating refugees who had asked specifically to be relocated near human space. They felt safer knowing that if another crisis arose, humans would come running. Second, Kim's voice grew more serious. Any distress call received by human forces will receive immediate response, regardless of whether the species in question is a council member, regardless of their political relationship with humanity, and regardless of any diplomatic protocols that might normally apply. If innocent people are dying, we will respond. Captain Oh Dong-hyuk leaned over to whisper to Dr. Shin, they're essentially asking us to be the galaxy's emergency response team. And we're saying yes, she whispered back, because that's who we are. The weeks that followed were unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Human engineering teams helped rebuild the devastated colonies. Human medical personnel established training programs to teach other species advanced trauma care. Human military advisors worked with Council forces to develop new tactics for dealing with unknown threats. But perhaps the most significant change was happening on a much smaller scale. Captain Lee Hyun was reviewing the final escort assignments for refugee resettlement when his communication officer handed him a personal message. It was from a young Theron named Pip, whose family had been rescued from a Devourer bioship during the final battle. The message was simple, written in careful standard Galactic, that clearly took considerable effort for a child to compose. Captain Lee, my family is safe now in the new colony. Thank you for teaching us what real courage looks like. My little sister says she wants to be brave like humans when she grows up. Hyun read the message twice, then looked out at the stars where human ships were escorting the last group of refugee vessels to their new homes. These weren't the same frightened survivors who had fled the Devourer attacks. They carried themselves differently now, with a confidence that came from knowing they weren't alone in a hostile galaxy. He composed a brief reply to young Pip. Courage isn't about being fearless, kid. It's about being afraid and helping others anyway. Welcome to the pack. As he sent the message, Hyun realized that the galaxy had fundamentally changed. Humanity was no longer the rejected outsider species from a dangerous world. They had become something far more important. The guardians that other species turned to when the darkness came calling. And for a species that had learned to survive by protecting each other, there was no role they were better suited to fill.